You'll start. Okay, folks, welcome. We have a small crew today, although our attendees do outnumber our panelists, which is always an encouraging feeling. We're here today to talk about community engagement with our colleagues from the Iowa Library for the Blind and Print Disabled. If you don't know me, my name is Sam Bowers. I'm the consultant for continuing ed at the State Library. And we have Denise, Leslie, and Tyler, and they're going to take us through today's topic. So we're really thankful to them. Just a couple of housekeeping things. You are in this space without access to your camera or mic, so you don't have to worry about any background noise that you might have. But if you do have questions or comments, you can use that chat feature to pop those in, and we will see them and address them at the end. So we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. You do have the ability to turn on an auto-generated transcription of today's webinar. It won't be perfect, but it will be something. If you need that assist, feel free to use that. And then if I don't know your first and last name, I'll be bugging you in chat to grab that info so we can make sure that everyone that needs to access the evaluation for credit in Iowa Learns can do that. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and we'll go from there. So thanks to Tyler, Denise, and Leslie, and thanks everyone for coming today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the intro.
Thank you.
So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get going. Sure. Don't think I need that. Let's go there. All right. So today we're kind of covering a lot. So we start off, the name of today is Community Outreach and PR. And as we go through this, it's going to kind of jump around a little bit because we are going to dive into accessibility and sort of the importance of that. And also just some really like basic terms when you're building different documents that could go out into the public space. And so that's why I really wanted to make sure that we kind of go over those and make sure that, you know, I get those topics out. So today you have me, Tyler Sweat, Accessible Media Specialist. Denise being our Youth Services Librarian will be talking in a little bit. And then Leslie Heinzler, our Special Services Librarian, is hanging out in the background and answering any questions that you guys might have. So about our library, Iowa Library for the Blind and Print Disabled provides books and other materials in alternative formats to Iowa residents of all ages who are unable to read standard print materials. So below there, we have our eligibility. So technical terms about what constitutes a blind person, as well as a visual disability. So that could be reading. You can't read standard print. Someone who is unable to read or use standard print as a result of physical limitations, or a person having perpetual or reading disability of sufficient severity to prevent their reading standard print. So that would be like dyslexia is what that is. So those are the who we serve. We are statewide. So game plan for today, we're going to talk about brief about universal design for learning. If you were at the last month's webinar, I talked for a whole hour about universal design for learning. So if you want more information after I kind of give my quick elevator pitch and give you guys some examples, you can go ahead, and I'm pretty sure it's recorded and you guys can jump on that. Then we're going to dive into document accessibility and just talk about the basics and the biggest things that I see when something is sent to me, as far as the issues that people have when they're making those documents. And then towards the end, we're going to talk about how you guys can advocate for accessibility with that PR mindset to just make your libraries more welcoming to people with disabilities and everything that goes under that. So when we talk about UDL, Universal Design for Learning, so Universal Design for Learning is just taking the concept of whatever you're doing and building it to allow the most amount of people to use it. So for example, an automatic door at the grocery store would be an example of Universal Design for Learning. So, or universal design, not for learning, that's school stuff is with the learning, but as far as universal design. So everybody can use the automatic door. If you're in a wheelchair, if you're a baby in a stroller being pushed by mom, you can use it. If you have a disability, such as you can't open like doorknobs, so you have, not as much dexterity in your hands, you can go through that door. So that's an example of universal design. It's something that is built for what I call people on the fringes. And so most of the population can use it. So that's what you want. So an example in a library setting. So I gave 3 here. So you're designing library instructional sessions, which present information in various formats. So text, images, video, and audio. So like here, we have information in various formats. Not only do we have the PowerPoint, we have the video and the audio of me talking right now, as well as the transcription of what I'm saying. So that would be an example of that, where it fits everybody's needs. We don't have to go back and retrofit something later. And so that's the big thing of universal design, is we're trying to avoid finding things that we have to fix later. Design library instruction sessions with various types of built-in hands-on work. So that's just giving your patrons an opportunity to show kind of what they're learning throughout it. Going to like a youth session. So let's say you have a reading group of kids that are coming into the library. When the book is done, then they have the option of, they could draw a picture of what they like, their favorite scene in the book, or they could write a paragraph of their favorite scene in the book, or they could act out their favorite scene in the book. So it's just different ways for your patrons or other people to kind of show you what they've learned. And then the last one is make sure several stations in the instructional room have assistive technology. So students can use screen reading software, screen magnification, Zoom text, just anything that goes on with that. And I dove really deeper into some of those other things at some of the other webinars. But the big thing to realize is a lot of the technology that you have already has assistive technology in it. It's just making sure that you're aware how to use it. And so that those students can, or those patrons can use it as they need it without having to add anything or have a special piece of equipment or something specifically for one person that comes into the library. Because even with assistive technology, I think a lot of times it gets like, well, the one blind patron that comes in is the only one that uses screen magnification, when really if it's already on the device and other people have access to it, that they might use it just as much. And so that's where just being aware of those things like, screen readers, on iPads, for example, they're standard. So if you could have a student with dyslexia that could use the screen reader to read what's on the page, it could help them decipher better what's on there. So just kind of allowing everybody to use it and being aware of what it is. So that's my quick overview of universal design. So now we're going to talk about basic document accessibility. So the reason why this is really important is because when you make something accessible, it allows screen readers and other assistive technology to read it correctly. So this could be, the example I just gave of somebody trying to read it with a screen reader. And if your document isn't accessible, that's not going to allow them to read it in the correct order, or it's going to read things that it shouldn't be reading, or it's going to just generally not give them the information that you want to give them. So that's why, these are the 4 that I picked, because I think they're the 4 biggest barriers when it comes to people using assistive technology to go along with documents that are put out into the world. So these could be, when I say document, so that could be like a newsletter that you're sending out through email. It could be your website. It could be just sort of anything that they're going to interact with electronically. We'll get into print documents a little bit later and talk about those, but these are just kind of the 4 that I wanted to present of the biggest issues that people run into. So the number 1 is headings. So headings is the one that people generally don't get in the right order, or they kind of don't understand the concept of them. So when we start with heading 1, so that's like the title or the main content of a certain area. There's only one for that whole section. And then from there, you go to heading 2, which is a major section heading. And then 3 is a subsection of 2, and so on and so forth. You don't really see anything more than like a 3 or 4, because it's just kind of like chopping it up a bunch. But I really like these examples. So if you look at a book, like heading 1's the title, and then you have, the main topic is heading 2, and then the subtopics underneath that are heading 3. Same example with a newspaper. And I'm going to go into Word after I kind of get through each of these, and we'll kind of go back and review them and take a look, so I can show you guys examples of how to fix some of these. But this is a big one, because this one is deciding how you navigate through the page. So if someone using a screen reader, they could navigate literally by headings. And so if they're not in the right order, or a heading 3 is actually a heading 1, it's going to throw off all of the navigation and not allow them to get around to look for a specific thing within that document. So then alt text is for pictures. And what alt text is? Alternative text. So what it is, it's when a screen reader goes over a picture, it's going to be able to tell the user what the picture is of. So it needs to be accurate, brief, and not redundant. So example, if you have 2 boys playing soccer, that's really all you'd have to put, right? Like 2 boys playing soccer. And it just, because a lot of times when alt text is put in without you messing with it, it's usually like the name of the image itself. So it's like img654327.gif. And that doesn't help at all. It doesn't tell you anything that's going on. And so if you were using a picture that was sort of, let's say it's in a newsletter and it's an example of your book club, and it's going to be a picture of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, then you would make sure that alt text said that's what it was, just so they kind of know what the picture is. So kind of like I said, accurate, brief, not redundant, not image of, logo of, graphic of. The screen reader is going to already know that it's a picture, so it's going to say image of, and it'll then give the description that you gave. You want it less than 125 characters, just because that's going to really get too wordy. And images should only support content and not to decorate pages. So that's the ones you want to do alt text on, are ones that are supporting the content that you're talking about. And if you have a decorative image that sits in the background and you still want to add alt text to it, but you can just add decorative image. And so what that'll do is it'll tell the user that there's no information, there's no content that is supported by this picture if it's just a decorative image. So that is the big thing with that. So color contrast, I've shown this web page before. We're going to go into it here in a minute. But it's just the ratio of text color and background color. And that one just helps low vision patrons, as well as dyslexia and other reading disabilities, to really make sure that they're getting the information from the page. And I'll show off that here in a minute. Last one is hyperlinks. So rather than posting your big, long website, we want to make sure that we have the correct hyperlink. So avoiding things like click here, because if I go over a screen reader, click here, it's not telling me where it's taking me. So you want it to have them know where it's taking them. So using descriptive link text that does not rely on the context from the surrounding text. So if I was talking about book club sign up, rather than having click here, if you literally made the hyperlink book club sign up, I'm going to know exactly what it is when I click on that link. Keep the amount of text link to a minimum. And like I said earlier, avoid using the actual link within the text of the document. So we're going to go back up here, and I'm going to go over to our WebAIM. So this is I think I've shared this probably about 3 or 4 times throughout all of these webinars, because it's one of my, it's just a really good tool to use. It's a contrast checker from WebAIM. So web accessibility in mind is what that stands for. And it allows you to just play with colors to see if they pass the standard of what needs to happen. So if you go down here, it's going to give you WCAG. So if you don't know what WCAG is, it's basically accessibility guidelines for the internet. So you don't need to really know a lot, but just know if you're getting a lot of fails, that your contrast is definitely off. That's the biggest thing you guys need to know when you're doing anything on these. But it's really kind of nice to play around with, and so if I get up here, so if you notice white text on this red background, it's failing a normal text, and it's passing for a AA, so AAA is obviously better in this standard for that. And then as well as your text inbox and what that kind of looks like. So it's just a good idea to kind of play around with if you're unsure about a contrast, just to make sure that it's working for what you're putting out into the world. So now I'm going to jump over to Word. I just want to give a few examples. I don't want that one. I want this one. Okay. So this is just a user guide of our Braille display that we send out to patrons. And so if you look up here at the top, we have all of these styles is what they're called. And styles are where you're going to assign something to text. So if I click on book reader here, it's already deciphered as a heading 1. If I go down to book reader menu, boom, it jumps over to heading level 2 because that's under book reader, right? And then book list, which is inside book reader menu, as you can guess, is going to go to heading level 3. So it's not that hard. It's just, I think the biggest thing that people don't do is they don't change this to heading. So what they'll do is they just increase the text size, change the color, but leave it as normal or no style at all. And so that's what messes it up. So by doing this and selecting a heading, what that's going to do is it's going to give a tag. So that's the fancy word for it. It's going to let the screen reader know that this is a heading 1. So then they can navigate. Because you got to imagine a big document like this, you have 26 pages. Being able to navigate quickly is really key when using a screen reader. So that's where it comes really in handy to have those plugged in. And now it does change the style. So if I select this and I'm on a heading level 1, if you notice, if I go to normal, it goes to the normal text. If I go back here and then heading 2, it's going to make it smaller. So just be aware that there are different styles that you can do, but you can also modify these. So if you don't want it to be blue, you can always go into these and modify it and then change the color and everything that you want for that specific heading. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, I realize that I'm going sort of through the crash course of accessibilities with documents, but I just want to make sure that these are concepts that you guys can look into more if it's something that you want more clarity on, just because these are the ones that I think are the most important in getting that sort of basic level of accessibility when it comes to electronic documents. So from book reader, so we're talking headings. The next thing we're going to talk about is alt text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert a picture here. So we're going to go to the best school in the state of Iowa. And we are going to, so I just dropped it in here, right? So the big thing to do, so format picture, it's going to bring up this side menu right here. And so what you're going to do then is you're going to go to layouts and properties. So it's the one that really doesn't make sense why it's there, but that's where it is. And the second thing down is alt text. Most of the time it's going to be empty. Sometimes like there will be just like the name of the picture in there, like I kind of said. So UNI logo. Now, title and description within Word can kind of knock people down sometimes as far as like getting confused with what's the difference. It really depends on what it is. So I put UNI logo. So in here I would put, just to clarify, University of Northern Iowa logo. Okay, so that's all you really need to go with that. Like, it doesn't have to really dive deep and say a yellow panther with the letters UNI above it in purple with a gold background. And that you can go that deep if you want, but really, like, for things like logos, it's easier just to say like University of Northern Iowa logo. Boom. They know what it is. They can just move on. Okay. So that's the thing with alt text again. So right click, format picture, layout and properties, alt text. And so now it's going to pop up when they scroll over it with a screen reader. Go ahead and take that out. And last thing is our hyperlinks. So let's say the hyperlink that I'm going to take you to is the color contrast checker. So on hyperlinks, I'm going to type something out here. So like literally like color contrast checker. So let's say you're talking about it and you're like, check out the color contrast checker. Right click, go down to hyperlink, and it's just all going to pop up. So you can link it to something on your computer, or you just would copy and paste that into there. And then it's going to color in blue with that link. The big thing, you just want to make sure that it's that it looks good and that it's not, and it can explain what it is without any other context around it, because that looks just a heck of a lot better than the website itself, because it's going to read the website after the text saying it's a link and this is where it's going to take them, versus this, which just really kind of messes up the page. And this is a small website. There's some that just stretch on forever that could really make your documents not great. So that's kind of the 3 or 4 big ones when we talk about color contrast. So headings, alt text, hyperlinks, color contrast. So before we move on to the next thing, I didn't know if we had any questions from anybody, because I know that this is like super crash course, run through it and kind of go through like really sort of intensive, quick stuff with accessibility. And so I talk about it all the time. So I just want to make sure that I got everybody and lose too many people.
I did not know that was where the descriptive text was on Word. So I have learned something today.
Yeah. So that's it. And that's also in PowerPoint as well. And those in Publishers is where you're going to find those things. With websites, it kind of lives in different spots sometimes. So it just depends on what like platform you're using, but they all should have it built in where you can type alt text in there with it. So just be aware of that.
And you might have mentioned this. I was kind of working on attendance, or is this the next part then, that putting these things in Word will help if you convert that to a PDF and post it on your website? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you build a document in Word that's accessible and has all the headings correct, if you turn that into a PDF, it's going to be accessible with a screen reader because you built it correctly in Word. And that's the thing, that PDFs get a bad rap. And I think it's mainly because a lot of times it's like scanned pictures of something, which are completely inaccessible. And so that's why, if you build it correctly within Word, then when you turn it into a PDF, it's going to make it accessible.
And so if you've built it correctly, there really would be no reason to post it as a Word document. There's not one that's more accessible than another if you've built it correctly.
Yeah, especially if the person using it doesn't have to input anything into it. If they're just getting information from it and it's accessible, then putting it up as a PDF is just fine. So,
all right.
Great question. All right, so now we're going to jump into, I'm going to go down here. We're going to jump into print documents. So 3 biggest things when it comes to print documents: fonts, text size, color contrast. So I'm going to turn it over to Denise. I'm actually going to stop my share and I'm going to turn it over to Denise, who's going to walk through some of these things. And we're going to show you a not great example. So.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tyler.
Yep. All right. You can go ahead and share, Denise.
You're doing a great job, by the way. I know a lot of times, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
A lot of times when you go through the process of deciding what to do with your created images or your created print copy, you're always deciding what works best for, universal design. And decision making, oftentimes you always want to make it prettier, eye candy, as one would say. As a Brailleist, a lot of decisions are made based on how it looks or appears. But I know for all of us, like as librarians, when you send out the information, you are sending it out to the community, to your patrons of the library. But you always have to think, what can I do that's going to be for everyone? So I have a quick example, and we've showed this example before in the past. And it has a lot of different things going on with it. There's a lot of different layering in it, a lot of different colors. There's circles, tips for, just all these different sizes, colorations. And the first thing I do immediately is think through, how can I make this would be, universal design. So I immediately kind of get rid of all of that, thinking about simplistic. And I love the fact that Tyler said that put it into a Word doc, create it in a Word doc, and start with that platform. And a lot of what I do is that I will put it into Word, but I will save it in a PDF because it is accessible with a screen reader. So I'm just going to talk over some of the different things that are going on with this, starting at the top. You have your kind of like your tips for spotting fake news. How funny. And we have different size font here with that. And then we have, so we could easily convert and change this very quickly. And I did make a few changes to this. I'm just going to drop down. This is saved in a Word doc, and it's just clean and simple, easy to follow, all very easily, kind of reading through it, you can kind of see where it's simple. So that's kind of the thought process. A nice font to save it in is usually kind of a size 14 font is usually a very easy font to read. I use Arial, which is a great font choice as well, because because sometimes your font will take on a whole different shape. Like you're not sure if that's an I or is that an L, but with that, it's an easily read font. And just keep it simple. I'm just kind of overview with this real quick, because I know there's a lot of different flyers and stuff that are sent out, but always keeping that in mind when you are sending information out, just kind of that universal design piece.
So I'm going to jump in here quick.
Yeah.
You want to leave this up? Yeah. So when you look at this one, like if you think back to the color contraster I just showed, like definitely the orange one is probably not going to pass. And also the background kind of is messing up. And I think the biggest thing is that people think the accessibility and the document being pretty don't work well together. And so I think that that's something that is not entirely true. I think there's some easy things you could change, because even on this document, if you could kind of make the text pop a little more by just changing some of those background colors and aligning, these top ones over, or even like, so we put down here, if you see this white box that kind of added in. So something where you can really distinguish the text. So if there's a circle, distinguish the text from that. I mean, because you even look where that white rectangle is compared to the background around it and how much anything in there you're going to read better. And I know it's in a bad spot. That doesn't make it look good. So I think that's the biggest thing to realize is there are ways to make things look pretty. You got to really focus on, am I allowing this to be presented to a larger group of my community, because that's what you want. You want the most information to get out to the most amount of people. So when we talk about things like text, like it does end up making a difference. Because if you look at something with the cursive up here for that subheading, somebody with dyslexia is not going to be able to pick up on that. I like black and white, black text or white text with the black background or white background, because that does definitely, from a contrast perspective, work really well. But this is where the font is impeding that more than the color contrast. And so those are things just to kind of think about when you're going through and building these types of things.
I'm going to stop sharing this. If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, because I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, Denise, and then you can kind of talk about the print side of it a little bit more. So yeah, you're good.
Sharing.
All right. Go back to PowerPoint. All right, Denise, you want to talk about alternative formats, just kind of the large print and Braille stuff?
Yes, of course. And so here we have an example where it's 16 to 20, but a 14 would be very acceptable as well. But 16 to 20 for alternative formats is the best. Also, I recommend the Arial font as being a choice. I use that all the time for a lot of the, if I do anything with my library that I send out to parents, and I usually do the Arial font because that works best. You want to avoid using all caps, bold. Just keep it simple and make sure to, keep in mind your color contrast. Kind of excited though. I'm going to try to show this. I was talking to Tyler earlier today, and I saying, I wonder, should I do a picture of this? And he goes, no, just actually show it to them in person on the camera.
We'll see if it shows
up. I have in my office an example of an embossable. And for some of, I'm just going to put this, for some that have signed up for me to come see you, I'm coming in and doing story time in your library, and I'm going to be bringing you guys a book to keep. But when we discuss embossables that you showed on your PowerPoint, what that is, and we have this adorable little hard copy book, but it has Impossibles in it. So what that is, you know what, you're right, Tyler. I don't think I can do this.
You got to hold it in like a really
I
flat
don't even know
angle.
how to.
It's
and
showing up a
everything's
little
backward.
bit.
Hey,
Yeah,
there we
yeah.
go.
Okay.
Right?
There we go.
Everything's backwards.
Yeah. So
So
bring
there
it
you
closer.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. So think about what that is. It's basically like a transparent sticker with the Braille dots on it. So it's like thicker than transparent paper, but it's a sticker that we put over the top of the book. And so for our patrons, what's nice is that you could have a parent who's sighted read a book to the student, as well as the student could read the book back to the parent. You know, the blind student could read it back to them. Or also we have blind grandparents that want to read books to their kids. So they know Braille, they can just get those books and they can read over that. And so that's what we do for those youth books, is those things that go over the top. We also do it for any poster that exists throughout the library. You know, if there's a sign on the door about hours, or the elevator's broken, or whatever else is going on, you know, there's always Braille on top of it. So that's and that's something that that we offer as far as getting Braille to you guys, if that's something that you want for a poster or something in your building. You know, we can get those Impossibles over the top of those. So I think you're muted, Denise. Maybe not.
Great suggestion.
There you go.
Yeah,
No, you're
yeah,
good.
that's
No,
a
you're
great
good now.
suggestion. Also, I'm going to kind of squeak this in just a little bit, and just when we do talk about doing our story walk and adding Braille to different books and stuff, that's what our plan will be, to add Braille to our book that we have for. And yeah, if you guys ever need anything with Braille or anything, just contact me direct. And I could actually, I'm Denise.Bean at blind.state.ia.us. And I would be more than happy to help you out with any of that, the decision making that goes into that. But yeah, your posters, and if you need Braille added to that again, that is something that we can provide for you to help with any of that. So questions around it? Yes, we're here for you.
So that kind of covers those alternative formats with Braille and Impossibles. So the next thing we're going to kind of jump into is how to advocate for accessibility. And so this is something that I think that it's, once you get started on advocating for accessibility, you're going to see places that you can make your library more accessible, really in really easy ways. And I think the biggest barrier to people advocating for accessibility is just either not understanding it. They just don't have enough knowledge around the topic. And so it's kind of, once you kind of get that knowledge base and you really start diving into it, I think it's something that every library can do, and it'll make a huge difference in your community. So the three areas we're going to talk about is culture and community, customer service, and acquiring assistive technology. So first thing, when we talk about culture and community, you are literally in your own communities, right? And they're all different. And so I think it's important to try to connect with the patrons, the disabled patrons within your community, to know their library experiences. And it could be a patron that doesn't come to the library that that you see somewhere else, and you can and get a conversation going with them about their library experiences and what keeps them from going. Seek out other disability organizations in your area that you could work with. That's always a great way to bring other organizations in that can really help you kind of identify what your library is doing really well and what they're not doing so well, and how you can kind of fix that. And always be an advocate for community concerns. I think that, a library is a place that everybody can go, and it's open to everybody in the community. And so I think if you keep hearing the same concern, or there's an issue that you feel is important to the community, advocate for that. Take it up the chain, take it to where, it needs to go as far as getting these concerns heard. And then within that culture and community, review out-of-date policies. So this is just kind of going through the policies that you have in place and seeing if there's any things that you can change to make the library more accessible. So things like, like a service animal policy. So No, I'm not saying allow everybody to bring their service animal pig, or what is the one on the plane? There was I think it was a peacock. Some lady tried to take on a plane as her service animal. So I'm not saying go that far, but at least kind of look at those things and approach it from, is this something we can adjust to allow more people to utilize our space and make it more accessible to our community? And then, as always, libraries are, I kind of consider them a part of the city that you're in, the local government, to have a community-wide accessibility plan. So that's working with local government officials to really kind of come up with a plan together as far as how you can make the community more accessible and how you guys can work with them to fix some issues that are going on. So it could be something as easy as working with government to get the crosswalk painted again, right? Because outside the library, cars rip through there. There's no stop sign. So it's things like getting a stop sign in, painting lines, just anything you can do to make access to your library for everybody. And so I think those are the really easy things that you can look at, and working with local government to have sort of a general plan. And I think what's really important when we talk about culture and community is that by doing these things and sort of reaching out and advocating for your patrons, it's just by doing those things, it's going to make the library a more inviting place for everybody. Just because they know that you're advocating for them and they know that you're trying to make it more accessible for them to come in there, they're more likely to come in. It just goes with that. If you feel like a building is more inviting to you, you're more likely to go there. It's just simple math with that. So that's why I think it's really important to focus on these things in order to make your library as accessible as possible. The next one, customer service. So this is, staff-wide within your library, reviewing your library's accessibility policies and just making sure that, an accessibility policy, you can look these up online, and some companies have big, long ones, but it could be something like talking about those, document accessibilities, like making sure documents are accessible, or once a year doing an accessibility audit where you have somebody come in and check your websites, check what you have and see what's going on. It just could be those types of things that you guys have an idea in mind of how you're going to address accessibility, and just make sure that you are continuing to do that. Always look to see what other libraries are doing for accessibility. There's hundreds of libraries in this state alone, let alone other states that, that you could kind of poke around and see what they're doing and take their ideas and, adjust it to make it work with you and your community. And so I think that that's a really good one to kind of just see whatever everybody else is doing. And third one, collaborate with staff to review building accessibility. So this is one that, and it could be something really simple. Like I'm trying to, like a good example would be like that. So like at a school, so like I used to work at a school, and we had a lift that took you from this like weird stairwell to the lunchroom. So it was like, if you were in a wheelchair, you'd have to go into this lift. It was only for wheelchairs, and it would lift you up, and it was like, 8 foot, and then you'd go into that. But if it broke, you got to go literally outside the door and up the sidewalk and then back in again. If you didn't want to go all the way down to the other side of the building, take the elevator over. So it's things like, if when you build the building, rather than having to put this lift in for somebody with a wheelchair, you could build a ramp in that space that then everybody could use. So the kid in the wheelchair doesn't have to get a key from the office to use it. He could just go up the ramp. Football player that got hurt, is on crutches, he could just go up the ramp. So those types of things, when we talk about building accessibility, I know that a lot of them are not changeable. If you're in an older building, those are things you kind of have to deal with, but it's just kind of being aware of them so you can address how to fix them in the future, or come up with better ways to make sure that your building is accessible as possible. And that kind of dives into Americans with Disabilities Act a little bit. And I realize that, and they have their own sort of standard as far as building accessibility, but it's just always something to be aware of when you're adding new things onto your library or moving things around, is just making sure that it is easy to use and the access goes along with that. Address universal design and accessibility when purchasing new equipment / programs for the library. Now, this is like my big giant soapbox that I always like to stand on, is that when you are searching out new equipment or different things that you're bringing into the library, having an idea to ask about accessibility and like, can all my patrons use this is really important, because what it's going to do is you don't want to get a new piece of equipment and you get it in there and then students can't use it because it needs an extra thing on top of it for them to use it. So then you're buying another thing to fix the first problem, which is if you just would have gone with equipment or software that is accessible, you don't have to retrofit it later. And so that's going to save you money in the long run. So I think just having the wherewithal to ask about those things, like, is it accessible? Does it work with a screen reader? Can all my patrons use it? You know, those types of questions are the ones you really have to be asking, because it'll save you a lot of time in the long run. And then the last one, have a procedure in place for requests for accommodations. So this is just, staff wide. So someone comes in and they're like, I want to use a screen reader on the computer. And so, this is where the jump drive lives, that we have our screen reader that you just give to them. And if they know how to use it, they plug it in, you turn it on for them, boom, they're going. So it's something like that. Everybody knows the process, or just kind of being aware of what exists in your library, just so they know how to turn certain things on, or they know how to get people the accommodations that they need. And so I think that's the important thing, is to have just a policy, a procedure in place that all staff is aware of, so that when someone comes in, boom, they get what they need, and so that they can utilize the space as best as they can. So that one's just a really big one. The biggest thing with customer service is that everybody's on the same page, right? Everybody knows where all the technology is. Everybody knows, a basic understanding of how to use it. And so that you don't get, on Tuesdays, this person doesn't know how to get the screen reader for me, so I go on Thursdays because that person does. Those are the things you want to try to avoid, by everybody on the same page with accessibility and what you have available to you. Last part is technology. So the first one always is making sure your website's accessible. So when you look at website accessibility, if I am moving to your community and I want to try to go to the library, I'm probably going to try to get on your website. If I get on your website and I can't get any information off of it, it's not going to go that great. I'm going to be like, I don't know where it is. I can't figure out anything because the website isn't accessible. So there is self-testing. So Wave and Lighthouse. Lighthouse is through Chrome. You can it's an extension that gives you an awesome report and tells you, it's a really good starting point to be like, because if you score like an 89 and you're missing a few points, 89 out of 100, and there's a few things that you can fix, it kind of lets you know, like, okay, we're doing great, but there's a few things we can fix. Versus if you get like a 50 and there's just all these red marks everywhere, then you kind of like, all right, we need to look at this again. Even if you don't understand why you're missing points, or you don't understand building websites, it'll still give you a good idea of how good of a job your website is doing as being accessible. And there's a lot of accessibility companies out there that'll test your website and do those types of things. You just got to kind of make sure that you know what you're doing with that, as far as getting the companies to kind of help you, walk you through that. Like I talked about with customer service, this kind of extends into that. Oh, there we go. Have staff be aware of what assistive tech is available and how to use it. And I'm not saying you have to be like majorly proficient with screen readers, but the things that like staff should be aware of would be like how to turn it on. Which on like an iPad, if you hold the home button until Siri pops up and you go turn voiceover on, boom, voiceover is now on. So it's things like that are really easy, and it's just being aware of how to do it. Things like Zoom text in Windows, that's already in there. You could do screen magnifiers. You just type that into the search bar and boom, it pops up. So it's just kind of being aware of what's available, how to use it. So I think that's a really big one that goes along with that. So Kathy put a point about Lighthouse. So you can use that to check any website. This is true, not just the one you have control of. So yeah, you can use Lighthouse is just on Chrome. I'll actually show you guys because it's a pretty good one to show off. I don't know. Let's go here. I don't know why I stopped my share there. Just got to get out of this. Okay, so we're going to go to here. And we are going to go to blind.iowa.gov, which is the departments page. And so I have it built in up here. And so I already have it built into Chrome. And when you open it up, it'll build right in here. I also have Wave, but I'm going to use Lighthouse. So all you got to do is click Generate Report, and it's going to take the page that you were on, and it's just going to work its way through it. And it's going to come up with 4 topics. The one that you really need to worry about is accessibility, if that's what you're looking at, but it does things like search engine optimization, as far as general performance, if it's really slow and why it's slow, which is a little more techie than what I'm talking about with accessibility. And so I think that's something to be aware of. So accessibility 92. So if I scroll down to accessibility, all of these checks highlight opportunities to improve the accessibility of your website. It always says manual testing, just because, that's always the most important. But then here for each of these, so like contrast, it says there's a few spots where our contrast is a little off. So these are our buttons up at the top. So these buttons are right up here, which these are controlled by iowa.gov. So the overall governing system, as far as that banner that we add up there, which I always think is funny with that. And then there's a few navigation things, but like these, like when you manually test them, they're fine. So that's the other thing, is just to be aware that sometimes things are off, but they're not off if you test them manually. So you don't really have to, a lot of times not know what's going on, but if you notice, there's like 3 things on here. And a 92, I'll take that. So, anything above, that you want about 90 or above, really, if you're making sure that it's a usable website as far as using accessibility. And then they have all these things to manually check as well. That they can and they talk about an accessibility review. So if you click on this, it kind of takes you into how to do it and kind of where to start. And so that's the thing when you deal with Google, with Chrome and those things, is that they do a really good job of walking you through a lot of this stuff, and just kind of how to do these reviews. And Rob Dodson is, he works for Google, and he's a great resource. A lot of good videos that he's put out over the years about like how to do a lot of these accessibility things. So that's Lighthouse. Let me go back to here.
So it could be a good resource to bring to your city to say, we've had some feedback about this, and here are some quantitative reasons why we think it could use some improvement.
I ran a basic website checker, and it says that your website is hot garbage. That's that's basically how that works.
Hot garbage, is that the technical term?
Yeah, that's very technical.
That's
very technical.
Okay, Kathy, you can take that one to your city.
So that, and then the last 2, so having staff be aware, and then ask about accessibility when acquiring new tech. And I talked a little bit about that within customer service, but just kind of being aware of accessibility. And a lot of times when you ask about accessibility, they're going to say that we're WCAG compliant, because it is something that companies need to be compliant on when they build different things. But that's why manual testing is always important, because WCAG compliant is great, and that's a start, but sometimes manually testing it, you still find some issues that keep users from accessing it to the full potential. And so that's something to kind of just be aware of, is this, it's not always completely usable when you get it into the field and people start using it at a higher scale than the IT guy at that company. So that's just something to be aware of. We got any more questions? We're kind of winding down here. Just wanted to make sure I cover any questions we have. I know I kind of went over a lot today.
It was good. This feels like kind of we're beginning to take a lot of things we've talked about throughout this series and put them all together and talk about that.
Absolutely.
Kind of community service and outreach and all the little things to keep in mind, little and big things to keep in mind to keep the train moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of times that people that use your live, like if you look at statistics on people that have disabilities, I think a lot of times people are like, well, we don't have a blind person in our community. We don't serve anybody like that. When I really think if you took a population, like there's going to be somebody that has issues reading standard print, or somebody that that needs assistive technology, whether they realize it or not. And so I think that that's the thing, is just by making your library more accessible, it's going to reach those people that you don't know, like you can't see them with a cane, but they still could be, could have some disability that's keeping them from utilizing some of the services if it's not accessible.
Well, and I think your example about a website is a good one. If I can't even use your website to figure out where the library is and what hours they're open, I'm not just gonna,
or like a program, like if I want to come to a program, like if I can't get to it, it's going to really throw it off. So most of the plow websites though are accessible. I think I've said that before, but they do a pretty good job of keeping, because they're fairly basic. So that's also a nice thing, that keeping them basic allows less weird things to happen in the background, because when you get into some bigger, fancier websites, they can get kind of convoluted with a lot of extra junk floating around. So
yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we do have a session available in Iowa Learn specifically on the plow sites and accessibility. So if your library is a site using a plow site, you can check that recording out as well. Marie Harms did that one earlier in the year for us. So very good. Well, Denise or Leslie, anything else for you guys to add?
No, I just think that what Tyler talked about, that key part is communication within the library. Just, having that constant awareness with each other is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciated too, Tyler, the point about kind of training all staff so that someone in your community doesn't feel like, well, I can only go on Wednesdays because Kathy's the only person who knows how to work the tools that I need, but making sure that all your staff feel comfortable to assist whoever is there.
Yep. And that's just having those policies in place. And even if it's like a checklist at the front desk, if this happens, then you do this, this, and this. I mean, that even makes it easier just to kind of help everybody get on the same page.
Well, yeah. And if you're not serving that population every day, perhaps you're in a small community, it wouldn't come up all the time, or maybe you're in a big community. Either way, it might not come up all the time. So
yeah, exactly.
Good to have that in place. And you can refer to some of the other webinars, I'm thinking of our customer service one, it looks like you're blind.
That was the etiquette one. Yeah,
the etiquette one. Yeah, our etiquette one.
Yeah, we showed those videos. Yeah. Those are good videos. So
yeah, they're delightful. So thank you guys all very much. And I'll send out an email to our attendees today with the evaluation in Iowa Learns. And I've loved this series. We're 10 in, we have 2 to go. Let me throw the link to the next one in Iowa Learns. I'll do that. And again, thank you, Denise and Tyler.
Thank you
very much.
And Sam, I'm emailing you the PowerPoint right now, because I always forget to do it. You don't have to send me angry emails. So I just sent it.
Angry.
I feel they're angry because I'm guilty that I didn't send them to you yet. So that's how I take them. So
the PowerPoint, and then where I can come get indeterminately branded apples, right?
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're doing Braille next time. Is that right, Denise?
Yeah. Yes,
so
that's
how
right.
Can we read over Zoom? How can we do this? You and I might have to practice so that we can, if you want to hold up examples, we can maybe figure out the best way.
We'll have more like we can do some electronic documents with Braille and kind of show off some of those in some of the programs. Yeah. Yep.
All right.
It's going to be fun.
And I think if any of the 10 of you still in here are going to the ILA pre-conference, that is in like 2 weeks. So we'll see you there if you're coming in person. So
wonderful. Yep. And I just put the link to register for next month's session in the chat as well. So
all right, good deal.
Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Yep.
Thanks. You, Sam.
Bye-bye.
Bye.